My older brother and I don't have a great relationship. We rarely talk, and the only family member he ever opens up to is our mom, to which he is even taciturn. On an occasional whim, if he's in a good mood, he will share his thoughts with her. This experience is something that we came to know during one of his more talkative moments, 4 years after it happened. It was the first time he had shared the experience with anyone. My brother studied abroad at an international martial arts university for sword fighting in Japan in the mid-2000s. The dormitory he stayed at for 2 years was located at the edge of a cliff and was rumored to be haunted. Although he knew of these rumors, my brother himself was never a believer in the paranormal. He had one roommate who was gone for a few days due to a kendo tournament, Japanese fencing, so he was alone during this time. One night around 12 a.m., after a long practice, my brother collapsed in his bed, exhausted from the day's arduous training. A few minutes after he lied down, he began hearing a piercing noise from the hallway, as if someone was using a tuning fork for an instrument. Initially, he had thought his floor mates were just playing around and ignored the noise. However, the noise kept growing louder and louder, to the point that he had to cover both of his ears with his hands. Then all of a sudden, the noise just stopped. As soon as it did, he heard the doorknob click open. He explained that the atmosphere in the room turned. The best he could illustrate it as was cold and dreadful. He's never experienced primal fear like that in his life. He then saw jeans and boots enter the room below the entrance curtain, which hid the body due to the way the curtain was set up. He instinctively knew that whatever came in was not human, and he shut his eyes tight. He kept them closed and continued to keep both hands on his ears while lying down on his bed. The entity then proceeded to walk over to my brother's bedside and began mumbling to him in a language that my brother could not describe. It wasn't English, Japanese, or anything else he's ever heard. It just kept mumbling to him. My brother was beyond terrified and dared not open his eyes. At some point, he finally passed out, and when he awoke, it was morning. He never told anybody about that experience. However, a couple of days after the incident, people in his dormitory began talking about similar paranormal things happening to them. He thought, well, shit, but continued to keep his own experience to himself, until 4 years later when he told our mom over dinner one night. My brother later found out that the cliff that his dormitory was built upon was a suicide hotspot, that before it was built, several people jumped to their death there. That was the first and only time he's experienced anything paranormal. This happened to me when I was living near Tokyo back in 2009. Living in Japan, my dream of racing in the Drift Grand Prix was close to coming true, but track time was far and expensive to come by, so I would drive about an hour north to Okutama. Okutama is beautiful. It has a giant calm lake and a thick forest. The road up to the lake was deserted after 11 p.m. Once I would exit the last town, there was nothing but a 2-lane mountain road with amazing hairpin turns, and presented the perfect opportunity to practice with relative safety. In the year and a half that I practiced there, I never ran across another vehicle during my runs up and down the mountain. Halfway up the mountain and next to the lake, there was a big car park where people can park and go hiking in the woods, or just look at the lake, I guess. Across from the car park, there were 6 vending machines. Some sold food items, some sold drinks, and some sold car accessories. The night I encountered Coffee Girl, as I call her, it was about 2 a.m. in November. I was taking a break in the car park. When I was walking towards the vending machine to buy a hot coffee, I noticed a young Japanese girl sitting at the end of the row of vending machines. Nothing was out of the ordinary. She was wearing long boots, a miniskirt, and a big puffy jacket, all within the normal fashion for the area. It was cold that night. I assumed she was waiting for a friend to pick her up. Maybe she missed the train or got into a fight with her boyfriend and he left her behind, and she was waiting for her ride. I decided to get 2 coffees, a black fire coffee, my favorite, partly because it has Godzilla on the side of the can, and a sweet coffee that most Japanese girls like from my experience. So I grab both coffees and walk over to her. When I get close to her, I hold out the coffee, and in Japanese I say, "Hey sister, here you go." My father is from Osaka, so my Japanese is a bit different from most Tokyo dwellers, and this usually spurs people on to ask where I'm from. She doesn't say a word and looks up at me, and I smile. She just nods at me and takes the coffee from my outstretched hand, and I say once again in my Osaka slang, "See ya." I finish my cigarette and coffee and drive out of the empty parking lot up the mountain. I felt like asking her if she needed help before I left, but I did not want to seem like a creep. My mom is Russian, so I look more Western than Japanese. It takes me about 4 minutes to go up the mountain, and then I turn around and do the downhill practice. When I came up to the spot where the vending machines were, I slowed down to a crawl to see if she was still there. She was gone. I decided to head back home, as I had an hour drive and I wanted to miss the traffic so I could get some sleep, as I was working the night shift in an ER at this time, keeping an eye out to see if I saw her walking down the road. I made it back to my apartment without incident. Later that night, a coworker, the doctor, a nurse, and I were in the back playing video games, as the ER was empty. When the front desk bell rang, we paused the game, and my partner went to answer the bell. I do not hear his greeting or him talking to anyone. I then hear the door open and him walking around. He returns a few minutes later, and I ask him what's up. He said, "Nothing, I think." "What do you mean, you think?" I replied. He said there was no one out there, no one in the car park, no one in the lobby or the halls. He said the only thing he found was this next to the bell. He holds out a can of Firebrand black coffee. I look at it in disbelief, immediately remembering the girl from earlier in the night. He said,
"Hey, isn't this the kind you like when you go to Okutama?"
I said, "Yeah, it is." The can was still hot, like it was fresh from a vending machine. The closest vending machine that had that type of coffee was about 20 minutes away, in a local Seiyu, like a Japanese Walmart or Target. I get up immediately and we both search most of the grounds. I said we are looking for a Japanese girl with red highlights in her hair. As we walk around looking, I tell him the story about how I saw the girl and gave her a coffee. We did not find anything. We ended up going back to the ER, and I told the rest of my coworkers the story. All three said I should not drink the coffee and that I should be careful. Strange things have happened to me all my life, so I was like, whatever. I drank the coffee, as I did not want to seem rude or ungrateful. My girlfriend would come stay with me in my apartment on the weekends. She lived in Shibuya. She would take the train down to see me. When I got home in the morning, she said that someone was ringing the doorbell and knocking on the front door most of the night. This was the first time that had ever happened, and it would continue to happen to her whenever she was alone in my apartment. She said she would have an uneasy feeling being alone there. Even my antisocial dog would prefer to stay in the same room as her when I was gone. I never saw the girl again, or have any other strange things happen that I could relate to her. However, later that year, I got a wooden arrow for burning at the Shinto temple, and I got a shimenawa for the front door. After this, my girlfriend said the knocking stopped. I am currently spending a year of my life teaching in Japan. I was able to enjoy some of Japan's wild landscapes during the late summer months of my arrival. Yet with the long winter we experience here, when spring came around, I was itching to see as much of it as possible. Thus, the plan to hitchhike from my home just south of Kanazawa to Miyajima, a famously spiritual island just off the coast of Hiroshima, and back again began to unfold. I must add before I go any further that, although I remain open to the concept of spirituality, I've never before had reason to believe in demons or ghosts. Japan is the land of the spirit and the soul, and offerings to those that have departed this world can be found in every single place you look. However, these two I just believe to be rituals buried deep within their ancient culture. Aside from the few days me and some friends spent exploring Miyajima, I spent my time alone. My only conversations were with the abundance of locals I met, who were politely inquisitive as to what I had in my hiking bag, and the raccoons that I would less politely tell to fuck off when they woke me up in the middle of the night. Some of these nights were filled with the sounds of the city, an exchange made in my favor, as I was then greeted by the dawning sun, rising to highlight whatever historical monument I'd pitched my tent in front of. But most of my nights were spent far away from the sounds of men and children. The blissful sounds of nature led me into my dreams. It is on one of these nights that my story takes place. It was nearing the end of my journey, and as such, I had ticked most of the places off my list of things to do. So I texted my mom to choose my next destination, and I woke up to very clear instructions on how to get to a secluded waterfall called Minnow Falls. I know it's customary on this page to not reveal the location where these stories take place, and I hope my story is not taken down due to my mentioning of it, but I tell this as a warning: do not camp here. I checked the weather forecast for the area. Showers, it said. Some people feel the rain, others just get wet. A quote by the great Bob Marley that I repeated to myself as rain lightly patted the windows. By this point in my journey, I had given up trying to hitchhike. I was able to see much more by taking the inexpensive local train, and so it was on one of these many local trains I was sat, ready to just get wet. It was a good 50-minute walk away from the small town of Minnow, through a beautiful forest and the gorge created by the waterfall. On sunnier days, I am told it's an extremely popular place for tourists and locals alike. However, on this particular day, I was greeted by few people. As with most of my walks along this journey, I took the less trodden path and wound my way up the side of this gorge further into the thickness of the trees. The rain was quieter here, more muffled. The gray sky barely made it through the canopy, but there was plenty of residual light. I passed a small shrine on my left and smiled at the small cup of coffee placed on its mantle. My first reaction to seeing cups of coffee and bottles of water on shrines is always that of surprise. If you've ever been to Japan, you will notice a very immaculate landscape, void of any litter or bins. The phenomenon of placing cheap vending machine coffee on shrines, I was told, stems from the thought that the spirits are tired, and Japan, being the highly caffeinated province it is, happily aids their wary guests. I inspected the shrine more closely. It didn't appear to be made out of stone, nor was there any head remaining. I shrugged it off as a product of time and made my way further down the path. The trees opened up slightly, and the dappled light reflected at me from the damp trunks. The world was sodden, and I really hoped that this waterfall had some sort of shelter for me to sleep under. Only 10 minutes past the previous shrine did I find another. An almost identical headless figure sat bow-legged with its hands by its sides. Less forest growth covered this one. Less time had taken its toll, but it remained firmly headless. I decided to leave an offering of my own, something I had never done before but felt inclined to, after my week of passing many a shrine without offering something in recognition. I had 2 plastic bottles, one empty and the other one more than half full. I couldn't afford to leave all of my water, so I poured some into the empty one and left it by the shrine with its lid off. As I walked away, I toyed with the idea that this bottle would fill up every time it rained, and the spirit would be happy. I had done a good deed today. I arrived at the waterfall just after lunch, and as I'd hoped, there was a large sheltered area which I scouted, and deduced it would be the best spot to pitch my tent for the night. The rain had turned the waterfall from what I would imagine is usually more of an attractive stream into a tremendous torrent of falling water. The 15-meter-high fall then ran its way down a fairly magical-looking gorge and around a corner. I spent the afternoon reading, drinking whiskey, and trying not to get my camera wet. I didn't want to pitch my tent until evening, lest the park rangers see me and tell me to pack up. Yet as late as I waited, the evening patrol inevitably came past as I was finishing the construction of my anti-spider dome.
Tento dame.
accompanied with the bilingual gesture of making an X with one's arms, translates to something like, "Kind sir, this is a nature reserve and you can't pitch your tent here, so please pack it up and move." I nodded politely and feigned the start of my deconstruction. I regretted many times over the course of this night that I did not listen to the kind old man, that I did not heed his warning, that I probably misunderstood what he was trying to tell me, and that I did not ask him why I was not allowed to camp there. My only compensation for pursuing my cause of adventure is that now I have this story to tell. When they left, I began to search the area for somewhere out of the way, that I could stay safely hidden from the mean park rangers that wanted me to destroy my home. I wish I could say I found somewhere with an even more beautiful view of the falls, but what I instead decided upon was a very large, disabled bathroom. I measured the inside of the room with my paces, and to my bemused delight, it was in fact more than enough space for the tent to fit. To my friend that lent me his tent and has yet to hear this story, and perhaps may read it here for the first time, the bathroom was suspiciously clean. I moved my tent into the room under the shade of twilight and began to hang my dripping clothes over the variety of handles one finds inside disabled toilets. Confident with my decision, and with the remaining light waning, I locked the door and got into my sleeping bag. It was a heavy hook-style latch attached to the heavy metal sliding door, perfectly bear-proof. After a minute, I had successfully deceived the motion sensor in the room, and the light went off. I absorbed the darkness and let my ears take control of my mind. Something those of you who have camped alone before will know is that the noise of the world around you becomes tantalizingly sharp once you zip yourself into your cocoon. The slightest snuffle of a hedgehog must be a bear, and the wind that momentarily shakes your tent must be a person trying to get in. However, my agile-minded brain had taken me safely inside a bathroom and behind a locked door, so I felt unrecognizably secure. Shortly after I zipped myself up, the sounds of the patrol bike began to haunt me. It was hard to tell over the sounds of the waterfall exactly where the car was, so I sat up and braced myself for the inevitable knock, knock, knock on the door, which would require me to pack up my tent in the rain and walk back through the forest at night. For nearly an hour, I heard the sounds of vehicles moving around. I sat clutching my knees, ears pricked, preparing myself for what I deemed the only possible course of action. When I was finally greeted with the solitary sound of falling water, I released my knees and my breath simultaneously. My heartbeat began to subside, and I braved turning on my head torch so that I could continue my book. I downed the remainder of my whiskey, and for a while, I let myself escape from the room I was in. At around 11 p.m., I closed my book and surrendered my eyes to the darkness. I allowed my body to find a comfortable place and closed them. The undisputable sounds of children laughing danced past me. Silence followed. My body froze. My skin grew cold. The only way I can describe the fear I felt would be to compare it to the paralyzing fear that comes from nightmares, but I was awake. When I mustered the courage to quietly unzip my sleeping bag, I reached for my phone and messaged my girlfriend and my mom, asking for them to tell me I am awake. I must have sounded crazy, but I needed to be sure. I locked my phone and continued to press my ears to the slightest sound, unsure as to whether my ears were now creating what I expected to hear. The laughing was fainter, further away. I no longer trusted my ears. I was trapped. If I moved outside of my tent, the motion sensor would trigger, and I'd be discoverable by whatever it was I had just heard. So in my tent I stayed. My hands clung to my phone, waiting for some external source to reassure me that I was not in fact dreaming. My rational brain had dissipated at this point. I knew my dream mother would also be able to tell me that I was awake, but I needed something. I heard the lock of the bathroom click and swing. I locked my phone and silenced my breath. My mind raced with causes and reasons, and what it kept coming up with was that the spirits in this forest had led a bear to my home. Unlocking the door was their final task, I couldn't check even if I wanted to. I needed the darkness to hide. I heard the click and swing of the lock again. I don't know how much time passed before I dared unlock my phone, but the message I needed was there. Both my girlfriend and mother confirmed my fears. I was awake. I quickly explained what was happening to them both. The last update they had was that I was hiding in a toilet. They had both thought it was very funny, but neither of them were laughing now. The logical woman my mother is tried to convince me that it was probably some kids getting drunk, and this was their favorite spot away from their parents. Oh, how much I wanted to believe that was true. The distance from the town and the quantity of rain refused my brain to accept that truth. However, it is what I began to focus on. But then I remembered the lock and the impending bear attack. I found my pocket knife and placed it near my head. Did the spirit unlock it and lock it again to tease me? I waited for another eternity. My mother urged me to focus on my breathing. The dreaded sound from earlier in the night, which I had very gratefully acknowledged would not come. The peril I experienced not half an hour before was back tenfold. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Silence. Nothing followed the knocking. The door didn't move. I tuned in on the sounds of the waterfall and focused on my breathing as per my mother's request. My mind's illusion of finding patterns within the randomness of the noises around me was now overwhelming. The laughing was still indefinable. I begged that it didn't come closer. A single loud knock brought a tear to my eye. Many a horror film I had seen, and into the forest I expected to be taken. I shielded myself through closed eyes and clutched my only tangible connection to the outside world to my chest. My body tensed, bracing myself for whatever was about to come next, and like this, my night was spent. I packed my tent up in the morning sun and was greeted with a gloriously gray but dry day. I told several people about my story. The Japanese among them were quick to believe, and the foreigners among them were logically skeptical. In the safety of my real home, hindsight shrouded my previous thoughts, and I began to think of possibly more logical causes for my experience. I've toyed with the idea of monkeys, real children, dreams, and illusions, yet nothing can explain everything I experienced. The overwhelmingly physical feeling of fear is something I will never forget. When I returned to work the next week, I was showing a colleague some of my photos, although importantly, I had decided not to tell them the story. When I got to the photo of my tent by Minot Falls, he stopped me and said, "Oh, Minot, many, many ghosts." I couldn't tell him my story, but my skin crawled with the reminder that for the first time in my life, I was in the presence of something I cannot explain. The following morning, I parted my curtains and saw an empty plastic bottle sitting lidless on the sill. I'm a sailor serving in the U.S. Navy. I'm going to use a lot of naval terms, and I'll explain what they mean. So my experience happened in January 2013, while I was standing sound and security, which is a watch where you rove around the ship, taking readings off of various equipment, and general security on board the ship USS Defender MCM-2, a minesweeper, stationed in Sasebo, Japan. During this time, the ship was going through a repair period. The crew was moved off the ship to berthing shacks on the pier, so the OOD, officer of the deck, and myself were the only personnel on the ship at that time. The ship had thin planks of wood on the deck to protect it from becoming damaged. One night, I was standing watch from 0000 hours to 0400, and I was sitting in CCS, Central Control Station, and I heard footsteps on the deck. At first, I thought it must be the EDO, engineering duty officer, walking around to make sure I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, so I paid no attention to the sound. 30 minutes go by, and I hear the footsteps again. Now I'm thinking, what the hell? So I walk out of CCS in the passageway to see if someone was there. I call out the EDO's name, but nobody answered. So as I turn to walk back into CCS, I hear the footsteps again, this time running straight towards me. So I freak the fuck out and run up to the quarterdeck, where the OOD was stationed. I explain to him what had just happened, and he tells me, "Oh, that shit happens all the time." Apparently, some years back, an engineer had hanged himself from the ladder well that went down into the engine space. To this day, I still get chills thinking about that night. It was one of the creepiest experiences of my life. I heard this story on Gaki no Tsukai, which is a great show from Japan. Matsumoto Hitoshi told this, so I'll be giving the credit to him. This man was coming home from work and was very tired. He entered the elevator in his apartment building. A guy hiding his face with his hat was standing in there. He thought to himself that it was creepy, but he had no choice but to get into the elevator. He said good evening, but the creepy guy ignored him. Before the elevator doors could close, the creepy guy suddenly walked out. On his way out, he bumped into the man. The man said sorry, but the creepy guy ignored that too, and he was hiding his face all that time as well. The guy thought, damn, that was creepy as hell, and got to his apartment. When he got in, he noticed that there was blood on him, where the creepy guy had bumped into him. The next day, he heard the doorbell ring when he was at home. He looked through the peephole and saw that a policeman was at his door. The man at home asked through the door what the problem was, and the policeman said,
A few days ago there was a murder in this apartment building. Have you witnessed any suspicious people around?
The man was really busy with work at that time, and he knew that if he said he had, it would have resulted in him getting involved in the investigation, taking up a bunch of his time, and he didn't want that, so he lied and said he hadn't. The policeman was like, okay, no problem, and went away. The next day he turned on the TV. The news talked about a murder in his building. It was really real, he thought. The criminal was apprehended. A mugshot appeared on the TV screen that turned the man's stomach. The man that they had caught was the policeman that was at his door the day before. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. My email, my shirts, my Patreon, my Instagram, my Twitter, and maybe some other shit are down in the description. Do I have something to say? I am gonna do a live stream soon, so keep an eye out for that. Oh, and I want to thank @_Flightermouse for letting me use some of her photography. And I guess that's it. So, be good to animals, even people. See ya. Oh fuck, man, they got us trapped in here.
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna have to jump out this window.
I don't want to jump.
They're going to get in here eventually. Oh shit. There's a bunch of them out there already. But we gotta do this now. So listen, I'll go first, then you, and then we gotta get the hell out of here before we're surrounded.
Okay.
Don't even think about it, just do it. We have no other choice.
Okay.
Alright, I'm going. Alright, man, come on, hurry up.
I can't do it, man.
Jump out the fucking window.
I can't do it.
Jump out the window.
My leg!
Alright, man, I got you.
No, you don't have time. Save yourself.
Yeah, you're right.
Huh? No, man, where are you going? I was just saying that, like in the movies. Oh, shit. Gel, snema, bergsbus, herish.
Hello? Why?
Sterlucci. What is it, Masseuse? Whoa. Hey, bro, I think something's wrong with your cow. Stationed in Sasebo, Japan. God damn it, Sasebo. Sasebo. Japan. Pronounce.
Sasebo, Japan.
Sasebo, Japan.
Well, how the fuck do the Japanese pronounce it?
Seisobo, Japan. Sasebo, Japan.
SASEBO, Japan.
That can't be right. Look at it. Come on, man.
Seisobo, Japan.
Sasebo.
Sasebo, Japan.
That one sounds right. Sasebo. Sasebo. Stationed in Sasebo, Japan. Stationed in Sasebo. Which one did I say was right?
Sasebo, Japan.
Sasebo.